Modi is up for his third election in a few months from now. Campaigning already underway in various ways. The fact also is that he remains the world's most popular leader. Polls like Morning Consult show him at a time when other leaders are grappling with massive anti-incumbency, show him way on top. From a branding, marketing, strategy perspective, what would one make of Modi, the global brand? To talk about this, I'm joined by one of the world's leading branding gurus, Sir Martin Sorrell. Is back
one
with
of?
us. Absolutely the world's leading guru. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay,
It's an
good.
absolute
Good to be with
pleasure
you. Good to
to
be.
have you with us. Now, typically, with any brand, political or
Yeah.
corporate, a certain level of anti-incumbency tends to catch on.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Modi,
Usually around
according-
about 12 or 13 years into leadership.
Prime Minister Modi continues to remain massively popular. We had
Absolutely.
polls recently, he literally
Absolutely.
pulled the party on the back of his own steam. In a global context, when you look at what's going on, what do you make of this?
Well, leadership is in short supply. I mean, one of the, I think, the critical issues, whether you're talking about US-China relationships, where Xi is a strong leader in a Chinese context, or you're talking about Russia-Ukraine, and where Putin is a strong leader, maybe to bad effect in a Russian context, and Zelensky in a Ukrainian one. And then, last but not least, Iran. Leadership is, to deal with those issues, is in short supply. And I think Modi stands out. I mean, if you ask people here at Davos, who are the great, if they're complaining about lack of leadership, that we don't have a Macmillan, that we don't have a Thatcher, that we don't have a Clinton, that we don't have a Blair. I take Blair back in the UK in a heartbeat. I think it's impossible, but and Starmer is following his playbook. So coming back to the question, I think Modi understands the power of nation branding, understands the power of communication. I mean, there's a very interesting parallel, I think, with the sort of UK campaign that we did when Cameron and Clegg were in power. Cameron was a PR guy, probably still is a PR guy in many respects. He understands the power of communication. When Theresa May took over, she moved that campaign from Downing Street into another ministry. And what the great thing about that campaign is government communication has to be integrated. And I think, you see here in Davos, you have, I thought it was 3 states. I think there are 4 Indian states that are promoting themselves here, in addition to India itself. And I think Modi understands that. He gets it. I mean, he's controversial in some respects, but he's led India to, India is a star of the world economy. I mean, you pointed out the growth rates yourself. So growth has helped. The US-China relationship, or lack of it, has also helped, because in an Asian context, if you're looking for growth markets, and the world is deglobalizing, so everybody's looking for growth and growth markets, India stands out. The Taiwan risk, the security risk, if you're big in China, do you want to be bigger in that? If you're small, you probably want to be bigger. Defined as, Chinese GDP is about 15 to 20%, about 18% of the worldwide GDP, 18 trillion out of 100 trillion. And that should be your weighting. So Apple and Tesla have about 15 to 20% of their sales there. They've got it right. But if you're Unilever in China, I think you're about 9%. Reckitt's is 7%. Somebody I spoke to here, a CEO, they're 3%. They want to be bigger. If you're big in China and you're looking around Asia for growth, the next market is India, then Indonesia, and India and Indonesia will be in the top 5 by 2050. So, pecking order by 2050, according to the pundits, is China, US, India, Indonesia, Germany. So 3 of the top 5 will be Asian markets. So Modi is batting on a strong, on a good wicket. But having said that, he's a Kohli, to use the analogy, in terms of his communications performance. He really does get it.
When you look at his communication style relative to other leaders at the moment and across time periods, what strikes you as being the most remarkable, or something that pops out and grabs your attention?
I think he's not afraid to take a position. He's not afraid to express his views. His authority is strong. I mean, that's where it gets a little bit controversial, obviously. But he is a strong leader. in a world where the economic indicators are working in his favour. I mean, much more difficult to do what he's doing, frankly, if there was zero growth or, God forbid, negative growth. So the backdrop is superb. Now, the Indian population is now the most populous country on the planet, having overtaken China. The quality of the talent, I think the West always tends to be a bit snotty, almost racialist in terms of, we know everything, and how can, people in call centers in India or in South America, in hubs in South America, in Buenos Aires, where we have a big hub, we have a big hub in New Delhi, how can they know as much as we know in the developed economy? We've been at this for years. So I think, these markets, which have tended historically to be lower cost, although their costs are rising, are extremely competitive in our industry from a technological point of view, from a data point of view, from a tech point of view generally, and from a creative point of view. I mean, again, our industry tends to look at their own markets, like the US and the UK, with rose-tinted spectacles. I think the only madmen or madwomen of any value are sitting in London or New York, and I don't think that's the case.
When you look at India as a brand,
yeah.
We spoke of the Prime Minister. When you look at the country as a brand, you followed the India story for many years.
Yeah.
How do you see the brand evolve in the global context?
Well, I mean, manufacturing, obviously, as a base, but the service opportunity there is huge. The other thing is that India has high-quality entrepreneurial talent. Whether you're talking about the Ambanis or whether you're talking about the Bhatis or the Mittals or whoever it happens to be, these are people who are of the highest quality from an entrepreneurial point of view. And what's happened is the domestic market, if any of them ever asked for advice, it would be, focus on the domestic market, drill out all the opportunities you can domestically, and then go global. And they are going global to a huge extent, both in their industries and personally in terms of their wealth and their philanthropy as well. So the Indian, and from an educational point of view, I'm a HBS graduate. Who are the best professors at Harvard Business School? Who's the dean? The dean, I think, 2 in a row now. Indian.
Nitin both.
And then you look at the AI professor, Indian, right? Work from home, a very outstanding young Indian associate professor. So the Indians intellectually and creatively and technically are extremely strong, extremely energetic, extremely entrepreneurial, extremely hardworking, and they enjoy life too.
There was a lot of conversation last year on the impact that generative artificial intelligence can have on advertising.
Yeah.
How much of that has actually happened in the way that was anticipated, and some of it has turned out to be hype in your view?
Well, no, I don't think there's any hype there. I think the big issue this year, or not issue, the big thing to be done is to develop case studies, user case studies. That's the big missing ingredient. It's affecting our industry in 5 ways: visualization and copywriting, which is a two-edged sword, because what took us 3 weeks we can do in 3 hours, literally, and using techniques which are extremely advanced. Then there's hyper-personalization at scale, the sort of thing we do for Netflix. We might produce 1.5 million assets for a Netflix, like Rebel Moon that we just launched, 1.5 million, at least in theory. We use 50 to 70,000. We can now do that at multiples of that. Third area is media planning and buying, which is important in an Indian context. The 6 holding companies employ about 250,000 people. Digital marketing in particular, 650 billion out of 950 billion last year of total media. Now that 650 can be analyzed by algorithms more effectively, as long as the data's good and the inputs are good, can be more effective. So over time, and the processes that the human beings are using at the moment are semi-automated or manual. They'll be replaced. So, and the outputs will be extremely good, and the humans will be able to have better information to make portfolio decisions for media. Fourth area is general efficiency. We've got an outside broadcasting exclusive with NVIDIA, AWS, and Adobe, where we reduce the cost of outside broadcasting by something like 80 to 90%. So general efficiency on the agency and client side. And then finally, I think the most exciting area actually is democratization of knowledge. In other words, in organizations, everybody will have access to information that previously they didn't. It was all very vertical. It's now going to be very horizontal. So those are the 5 areas. There will be more. But coming back to the question, the key issue this year, the chip manufacturers are producing chips and it's going like that. The processors and cells are going like that. In order to deal with that supply, over time you're going to have to develop comprehensive use cases. What we see at the moment, the CEO calls the CMO and says, what's this AI thing? The CMO panics, calls the agency, they don't know either. And what we're seeing is what I would call find out audits, analyses. What we're really interested is in the big transformation programs. And that's really important because there are 2 things going on in the world. One is the geographical fragmentation I mentioned before. And the second is because growth will be slower overall, because inflation will be higher and interest rate will be higher than we've been used to, at least, I think technological transformation and driving down cost and being efficient will be more. So AI-driven technological transformation is really important. To demonstrate to clients how to do it at scale, you need user cases.
You're a cult figure in the world of advertising.
I don't know about
Given
cults,
that
but
a lot of thinking
yeah,
is now being done by machines,
yeah.
who can arguably think better than an individual can. If they're young, and because so many people in the advertising marketing fraternity look up to you, if somebody wants to be a Martin Sorrell, if somebody wants to be big and
God
good
forbid.
in what he does, given that there is now so much competition from these machines, how should he do
Well,
it?
you don't want to look at it as a competitor. You want to look at it as your co-pilot,
So how
as
does
they
an
call it.
individual stand out then?
Well,
how
you
does the
can.
pilot stand out?
The technology enables to do your job more effectively. I mean, the big question.
But it also equalizes a lot of thinking, right? Everybody has access to the same tools.
Well, yes, but there's a thing called the brain, which enables you to use that even more effectively. So, individual A and B and C will use the machine in different ways, and they will execute in different ways. And the creativity that you have, the big issue is whether there will be more of us or less of us doing this. And my view is, which is an unpopular view, is that there will be less. I mean, I wrestled with economics many years ago, and still do. And John Maynard Keynes wrote in 1933 that automation meant we'd have more holidays. He may have been dead right, but about 100 years later it comes to fruition. I actually think it will be a net destroyer, but that's controversial, and there are people here and others who say no, it will add jobs. Now, there's an interesting confluence between that and what's happening socially. There's more distributed working. There's more work from home, work from anywhere. COVID didn't create that accelerated it. So there's a sort of an interesting sort of 2 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that come together. Maybe Gen Z are right. Maybe we shouldn't be in the office all day and every day. Maybe we should be working from different parts and geographies. Maybe we should have more portfolio careers. Maybe our lifespans with companies should be shorter, and we should flip from flat, not something my father, for example, thought was advisable or possible. But I think is a really interesting thing. It doesn't get talked about much here, actually, interesting, and I think it should be delved into, that maybe this generation will be happier than we are because they have to work less. Maybe it's no bad thing, right? And maybe...
How do they get rich?
They'll get rich by using those machines, but for fewer, the work-life balance. I mean, maybe you say being rich, maybe certainly in the developed world, the so-called developed world, the E7 is different to the G7. I mean, there's an interesting fact that the E7 now is bigger than the G7 GDP-wise. And if you strip out the US and China, the E6 is bigger than the G6. So the world order is shifting. And you said, what happens if you be rich? I mean, do you want to be happy?
That's
a lot of rich people are not happy.
Whole different conversation by itself. Last question, Sir Sorrell. This year, what is it that's exciting you the most, and what is it that spooks you the most?
Well, what spooks me the most is the geopolitical stuff. I mean, I came here thinking everybody would be doom and gloom, the 3 big things that we talked about, touched on. And the interesting thing is, in one of the sessions yesterday, people were asked to say whether they thought 24 was going to be better than 23. The majority of the people in the room put their hands up, which flummoxed. There were several journalists, particularly gloomy journalists, FT journalists who, the sun never rises, who said you must be smoking things. And a Harvard professor who said, he disagreed with that. So I think the thing that spooks everybody, and look, the level of uncertainty is still high, but it's less than it was last year, because last year everybody expected interest rates to rise. This year, somebody from the ECB said they will be flat this year, but it looks like they're going to go down. The British Chancellor said he believes in low taxes, and economies with low taxes always do better than ones with higher taxes, and sort of there's a little bit of a nod there about inflation coming down and interest rates coming down. So it's less uncertain now. So it's better. The atmosphere, economic atmosphere, is better now. So that's the good news. The bad news is something can happen politically, can throw us off. Who thought that Iran and Pakistan would be trading missiles as we sit here in Switzerland? So Lord knows. And then we have more than half of the world's population is capable of going to the polls. 70 countries are going to have polls this year. So there's a lot of political uncertainty. And if the White House changes and Trump is re-elected, which I don't think American business actually thinks is a bad idea. I don't think they like to tell you and others they think it's a good idea. But Jamie Dimon, to be fair, did say there are things that Trump said about the UN or about the economy that or the Abraham Accords or whatever it is that were good. It wasn't all bad. But Trump, for the North American economy, is not bad news. Lower tax, lower regulation, and that's what business welcomes. Whether he's so good on a world stage, we're waking up to X's every morning and shaking in our boots, is another thing. So it's the political instability that can derail things. I think economically, things are probably, people feel a little bit better than they did last year. Still cautious, but feel better. But it's the political, the monkey wrench that is going to be the difficult one to focus. It's the uncertainty. So people come on your program, and one journalist here said to me, why don't CEOs tell me the truth? I said, well, they're not going to come onto your program and tell you, the truth. And then when you deal with their people, you find that the level of uncertainty that their people have is huge. Because what happens is they say, look, we've got to get it right. Be careful on your spend. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is you see, with listed companies in particular, a pattern of sort of quarterly spending at the end of the quarter. So in the March quarter, they'll delay spending until March, until they know they've hit their numbers, and then they'll spend, or in June, or in September, or in December. So there is still uncertainty about it.
So we leave it there. Fascinating insights. So much wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For joining
Thank you,
us
Rahul.
in the freezing cold here at Davos.
Yeah, and you don't have a coat on.
I have a very nice merino wool on myself.
Okay, all right, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure
Thank
having
you.
you. Thank you. Come.
Very good, thank you.
Darwin Platform Group of Companies is one of the fastest growing diversified Indian conglomerates with global footprints. It is setting up offices globally and tying up with companies across the globe for multiple sectors. The company has ventured into real estate and construction, stockbroking and finance, arms and ammunition, mining, airlines and many other sectors.